All right. What is this part of the plane? The leading edge. Okay. This part? Trailing edge. What's a chord line? Oh, you had all the words.
The wing form. But they were line between the relative width. Hold on.
No. Oh, you said all the words, Mason.
So.
Yeah, leading edge, it's the line that goes from the leading edge to the trailing edge. You're conflating it with the relative wind angle of attack.
Yeah.
So yeah, how does this is that line fixed? Can it change at all?
Yes.
How?
Flaps.
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 Yeah. Okay. What is this? This? Yeah. This? Yep. And this elevator. Okay, so the wings produce lift, right? What does a horizontal stabilizer do? Yeah, it's basically an upside down wing. So as this is pushing us up, this is pushing the tail in the opposite direction so we can have some stability. Okay. What are the four fundamental forces of flight? Lift, weight, thrust, and drag. Someone who's not Laura, tell me about lift. What does lift oppose? Weight. Okay. And what about thrust? What does that oppose? Drag. Okay, someone very brave. Tell me how lift is produced. How do we get lift?
Bernoulli's principle.
Bernoulli's principle. Okay, can you tell me more about that?
There's low pressure in the bottom wing and there's high pressure in the top wing, and the pressures want to meet. So, the low pressure wants to go high pressure, so it pushes up.
Okay, so we have it a little bit flipped, but the logic is similar. So
High pressure.
we have low pressure on top, high pressure on the bottom. So high pressure, we think of more pressure going from the bottom and less pressure on the top. We're gonna produce lift. Why do we get low pressure on top of the wing? Venturi effect. Tell me more. And that's related to Bernoulli's principle.
The wind goes over the wing faster and top of the wing.
Okay, yeah. The air is accelerated over the top of the wing. And how do we get that acceleration over the top of the wing? Bringing in the other fundamental forces.
Drag.
Well, thrust, which yeah, we can't have that without thrust, without forward movement. Lift, weight, thrust, drag. What are the two main categories of drag? Parasite drag and induced drag. Okay, what kind of parasite drag do we have? We have a few different kinds.
Would that one be skin friction?
Skin friction drag, yeah, that's one of them.
So like a form drag.
Form drag, it's another. There's one more. Interference drag. So Form drag is just, this is an object in space, it takes up space, it's gonna have drag. Everything has form drag. Interference drag. We have this box on top of the wing, have a big old right angle. You can imagine this is going to create a lot of drag. Any right angles, anything sticking up out of the plane, that's going to produce interference drag. Do we have anything on our plane that helps us combat interference drag?
Yeah. It's the shape of the wing at the base.
Yeah.
Different.
Yeah, that's. Looking at these planes, is there anything that you can see that's getting rid of some of the right angles?
Isn't it the it's starts with an F, like right there where
Yeah,
main
you're right.
flex or it's the
Yeah, it's called a fairing.
fairing.
Good job, thanks. Yeah, these fairings here cut down on our interference drag by smoothing out those right angles. And the other one is skin friction drag. So that's just the texture of the material. If our plane was made out of sandpaper, it would have more skin friction drag than if it were perfectly painted, super smooth, polished. That's why paint jobs are so important on airplanes, because it reduces that drag.
But is it true that skin friction state that no smooth surface is actually smoother than the particle level? Not like zoomed in.
Yeah, of course. Nothing is perfectly smooth, but things are more rough than others. So we can't eliminate it completely, but we can mitigate it by making it as smooth as possible. Okay, so we talked about all the different types of parasitic drag. Who wants to tackle what induced drag is and how that's formed? John? Showing up late?
Yeah.
How dare you have to take your car to the shop?
You know,
What's wrong with it anyway?
what is it?
What's wrong with your car?
Every time it turns, the wheels are like clicking like crazy. Which I don't think it's like
Doesn't sound good.
I don't think that's what it's supposed to do. So I scheduled it for 8, but the rental took forever. So
That's all right. Tell us about induced drag.
yeah, I'm not sure. I think it's like with the plane. It's induced drag, like if you throttle up, you pitch up, it's gonna increase the lift, but it's also gonna like change the angle of the relative wind sitting the wings.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm hearing is that it's related to lift somehow, right?
Yeah,
Induced
it's
drag.
like as you increase lifts, you're also increasing drag.
Yeah, more lift is more induced drag. We could stop there. But what's causing it? What's causing induced drag?
You're like there's as you increase lift, you're basically increasing the amount of surface area of the wing that the relative wind is hitting.
Is it because the pressure under the wing?
It does have to do with pressure. So we have low pressure going over the top, high pressure on the bottom. And this low pressure and high pressure want to meet. The high pressure wants to move to the low pressure. Makes sense, just like if you blew up a balloon and let it go, the high pressure inside the balloon would automatically go to lower pressure. Okay, so it wants to do that, and it'll do that here and here and here and here. When you get to the wingtips, it doesn't want to travel all this way to get to the high pressure, or to get for the high pressure to get to the low pressure. Instead, it'll take a shortcut over to the side. So we have this high pressure on the wingtip, but then over here, we have this kind of, we'll call it ambient pressure that's lower. So it'll go, instead of going from here to here, It's gonna go from here out to the side. And then we have this ambient pressure next to this lower pressure, which that'll move over here and it'll make this spiral. Does anyone know what that's called? Yep, that is a singular vortex or plural vortices, wingtip vortices. So it's making that wingtip vortice. So with those, okay, someone tell me why that's important. Why are wingtip vortices important? Any reason?
It's a really big plane, that's the turbulence that it creates.
Wait, turbulence.
Yeah, wake turbulence. Yeah, exactly. The same thing that makes wake turbulence makes this induced drag. So as these wingtip vortices spiral downwards, it changes the relative wind. So it's deflecting this relative wind downward and backward. So now our lift vector, instead of being straight up and down from the wing where the wind is hitting it, it's now slightly backward. So we're going up, but we're also going back a little bit. So the thrust has to, over that. That's how induced drag works. It is the wingtip vortices deflecting that relative wind, giving us a backwards lift vector. When would we have the most induced drag?
I know.
During climb out, yeah. Why would it be during climb out or something, a situation similar to that? Yeah, the more lift we produce, the more induced drag we create. Okay, cool. Is that roughly how these slides went? Or forces of flight?
Wingtip versus not. Wingtip.
Yes. Yes, but they are very, very closely related. Yes, so we talked about Bernoulli's principle a little bit. We use Bernoulli's principle to explain the Venturi effect. So when a certain amount of a fluid, could be liquid, could be air, remember air is a fluid. We have a certain amount of air with a certain density. When it is constricted, it must go into a low pressure state and be accelerated through. When things go from high pressure to low pressure, what happens to the temperature? It cools down. Is there, thinking about mechanical systems, why would that fact be important? That when we have a Venturi where we get a lower pressure acceleration, making it colder, why is that important for us to know as pilots?
Icing.
Icing, what kind of icing? Carburetor icing, yeah. Induction icing is another term for it, but yeah, carb icing. We don't have carb icing in our planes because most of our planes don't have carburetors, and the ones that do, the carburetors work a little differently. We'll talk about that later. That all makes sense? Anyone want to talk more about the Venturi effect?
Is that the same thing that's causing that signal? Like,
It can. So when can we get it's called structural icing? What do we need to get structural icing?
Non-standard pressure, visible precipitation, and forgot the
Well, we don't need, the pressure doesn't have anything to do with it, but we do need to have some form of visible moisture. Yeah. I think maybe you're thinking about thunderstorms. We need a unstable lapse rates, visible, yeah, you're thinking about thunderstorms. So we need to have visible moisture. What else do we need for water to freeze?
sensation.
Okay, Yeah, we do need condensation nuclei. What else do we need for water to freeze? Yeah. Well, not exactly below zero. It just has to be close to freezing. Why, considering the Venturi effect, why does it just have to be close to freezing? Let's say it's 1 or 2 degrees Celsius outside in the air that we're flying through. We have some visible moisture. We can get icing when it hits our plane. Why?
Low pressure. Low pressure.
Yeah, can you say it's, can everyone hear that? Yeah,
Because the cold, low pressure air going over the wing.
yeah, well, it'll cool the water droplet. More specifically, it'll cool the surface of the wing. So we have slightly above freezing water hitting the below freezing wing. And it's just like, I don't know, those like, you ever been to Cold Stone or like any of those places where they chop up the ice cream on there? Yeah, it's the surface is cold, so it keeps that frozen. All right. Okay, we talked about leading edge, trailing edge, chord line. Chord line changes when we put flaps in. Creates more lifts. What does it also create? Induced drag, yeah, more drag. So can someone tell me, why do we use flaps 1 when we take off, but flaps 3 usually when we land?
Less drag,
What?
flaps 1, is that if you're at 3, great, and more drag, just like.
Yeah, so I will interpret that as flaps 1, we get extra lift, but we're not creating our lift to drag trade-off is not as extreme, so we're getting that extra lift without creating a whole bunch of drag. We have flaps 3 when we're coming into land, because 1, we can control our descent that way, more drag, we're gonna be able to come in steeper, slower. It'll help us keep from stalling. Why would flaps 3, at what airspeed would we probably stall with flaps 3?
Fine.
40. Clean is 45. Yeah, let's go down that rabbit hole for a while. What's our rotation speed? What is Vx? Vy? What's the difference between Vx and Vy?
BX gives you the airspeed to clear an obstacle.
Okay.
VY gives you the right to climb a certain point.
Yeah. Can someone build on that? Why is that? Angle versus rate. Yeah, what does that mean? I'm stupid.
Gives BX the best angles. And the most width, I guess, given the time, distance.
It's one of those two things. Yeah, distance. Yeah. So if we're trying to get over this obstacle, it will take us longer to get to that altitude, but we'll do it in a shorter distance. We'll be going slower, but we'll be climbing more aggressively. But Vy will get to that altitude faster over time, but we'll use more distance. So why do we normally take off with Vy? We don't have an obstacle to clear, so yeah, but why not just go Vx anyway?
Yes, it's less efficient.
It is less fuel efficient. Any other reasons? Yeah, it's less fuel efficient because there's more drag.
Well, a bit of solid, yes.
I guess that could be a consideration, but no, not really. We're still pretty far away from that, at least 20 knots.
Do you climb fast?
Yes, you climb faster. So over time, we get our altitude quicker. Why is that important when we're taking off?
Safe.
Altitude is safety. Exactly. If we have an obstacle to clear, then we'll make that trade because we don't want to hit the obstacle. So that's a safety matter. But we want to get to an altitude where we can troubleshoot, restart the engine, maybe turn around, make an emergency landing. So we want, yeah, if our engine's going to quit in 30 seconds, it doesn't care, like if we're at VX or VY. Yeah, we want to get as much altitude as quickly as possible when we're taking off. That's why we climb at VY. What's our best glide speed? 72. So our best glide speed and our best rate of climb are the same. Do all planes have that?
No, I think that was just a coincidence.
It is just a coincidence. If your best glide rate is not always VY, it just happens to be with our plane, that gets found out through testing. What's the max speed we can have our flaps set at? 85? What's the minimum speed we can have our flaps set at?
0.
0. Good. What's maneuvering speed? 91? Can maneuvering speed change at all? I don't think we talked about this. Maneuvering speed is based off of our max gross weight. So if we increase our weight or decrease our weight, our maneuvering speed is going to change. The lighter we are, the slower that maneuvering speed is. Heavier we are, the faster that maneuvering speed is. But that's a topic for another time. Maximum structural cruising speed. It's a different number from 120.
Is it 35?
No?
It's never seen.
Yeah, 135 is VNE. What's maximum structural cruising speed? 110. Yeah. Okay, so the numbers are 40, 45, 55, 65, 72, 72, 85, 91, 110, 120, and 135. Okay, maximum structural cruising speed is the fastest indicated airspeed you want to have when you're cruising. However, if you hit a bunch of turbulence, this turbulence can cause G's. So why do we have maneuvering speed again? Like, why is maneuvering speed important?
It's the speed in which the plane can handle abrupt movement without any structural damage.
Yes, that's a really good definition. I'll add on to it that you can have a full deflection of any control surface without exceeding your limit load factor or causing damage to the plane. So if we hit some turbulence, well, that can happen. It has to do with how many G's you're pulling. So if you hit some turbulence, would we be going at our maximum structural cruising speed of 110? Or is there a better speed to fly at if we have a lot of turbulence? Considering my setup to this question. Go slower to maneuvering speed. Yeah. All right. Chord line
120.
120, that is
Is it?
It's-
118 if it's what you're thinking of, maximum speed and level flight. VH.
yeah, we have different speeds depending on the publication, but it is 118 or 120. Yeah, the BNE 135. Okay. Angle of attack. Someone tell me what is angle of attack? Define it for me.
I think
Beautiful. So like, if I were looking at my attitude indicator, what angle would that be? got like 2.5 degrees, 5 degrees, 10 degrees, 20 degrees. What angle would that be on the attitude indicator? Our critical angle of attack.
Over 30.
It can be. So it's a little bit of a trick question. Because our angle of attack is measured by the relative wind, like Mason said. What is our attitude indicator based off of? The horizon. Yeah. So is our relative wind always coming straight at us? Like parallel with the horizon? No. If we're climbing, our relative wind is actually coming from here, more or less. So depending on how fast you're going, there might be, every plane has a critical angle of attack. You could be in like, I don't know, a Blue Angels. What do the Blue Angels fly typically? Does anyone know? I don't know, whatever plane the Blue Angels fly. They can go absolutely straight up. Their attitude indicator would show 90 degrees. I don't even know if it would work. They might just be spinning around. I don't know what it would do. But it can go absolutely straight up if it's going fast enough, if there's enough thrust. But their angle of attack would still be like, a degree or something like that. Does that make sense? That's why we can't just say our critical angle of attack is 18.5 degrees, because it has nothing to do with the attitude indicator. It just has to do with the relative wind.
Liners also go.
Yeah, they go, I mean, not to the same extent, but yeah, they climb at like 3,000, 4,000 feet per, like they go fast. And yeah, they're climbing pretty hard. Okay, changing chord line. Cool, everyone's seen that. This is what a stall looks like. But this picture could be really in any relation to the horizon. It just matters where the relative wind is coming from. So if the relative wind is coming from here, we haven't exceeded any, haven't even come close to our critical angle of attack. But if our relative wind's coming from here and we're like this, then we will. So we won't watch this video again? No? Okay.
And back to stalls, that's the proper definition is an uncoordinated spin, right?
No. So stalls and spins are related. Someone want to tell me how stalls and spins are related? They both involve velocity lift. Okay. What do you need to get into a spin? It's an uncoordinated stall where one wing stalls more than the other. You can do an uncoordinated stall. It's called shit, what is it called? You can like do a slipping stall. There's another name for it that I'm blanking on that I had to do for my CFI. But you can do that safely without getting into a spin. But if you're skidding and you stall, then you can get into a spin. Yeah, but it's where you stall, you have to have a stall, and one wing is more stalled than the other, which one wing creates more drag, the other creates more lift, and gets you into a spinning situation. So yeah, stalls and spins are related. You need a stall to get into a spin. What was my original question?
Oh, stalls.
Or they would.
Oh, yeah, okay. Okay, well, asked and answered. All right. This is the rudder. What direction does the rudder control? We had a name for it. Yaw. This controls yaw. How about the elevator? What does that control? Okay, and ailerons? Great. We know pitch, roll, and yaw. Great. This was kind of counterintuitive for me, but it makes sense if you just envision it. So we have roll. I think of roll as like a horizontal thing, but it is a horizontal thing, but it's rotating about the longitudinal axis. This axis, this is what it's rotating. Make sense? Yaw is going to be about its vertical axis. So if we had, these are vertical axis, yaw is going to pitch about that. And pitch is going to be about the lateral axis. It's just about what it's pivoting around. Pitch, roll, yaw.
Longitude.
Yeah, I guess that would be fair to say, but yeah, that's fair to say. It's probably not always that. It probably has to do more with control. Yeah. I think it's unimportant. It's just that it is the axis on which it is rotating is vertical, right? But it could be over the center of gravity, I'm not sure. Okay, we got our control surfaces. Okay, what are the two different kinds of stability? I'll just say it, static and dynamic. What's the difference between static stability and dynamic stability? Yeah, use your words.
How the plane responds.
Yeah. Yeah, I think both of you are close to it. It's the plane's immediate response to a change in control input. So it's what it does basically right away in the short term. What's dynamic stability? Over time. Yeah. Actually. PHAC chapter 5, aerodynamics. If you're struggling with aerodynamics, PHAC chapter 5. You guys saw a good. Picture of this. Oh, where is it? There we go. So we have positive, neutral, and negative static stability. This is just the initial reaction. So if we have static stability and this ball rolls uphill, it's going to roll back downhill. That's positive static stability. Neutral static stability, we push this ball, it keeps going. So if we, pull back on our controls and let go, it would just keep going until we push down. Negative static stability would be we do a small input, like we pull back just a little bit, and then it accelerates as it goes over. So we talked about dynamic stability, that's over time. We have to have positive static stability to talk about any of the other dynamic stabilities. So if we have positive static stability, we can talk about how it changes over time, because it has to come back to that first state in order to talk about like how it's going to change. So positive dynamic stability would be that ball rolls up and then it rolls back and then it rolls back and forth and gets smaller and smaller and smaller until it stops. The oscillations get smaller. Neutral static stability would be it goes up and back forever. It just keeps cycling same way, it never diminishes. If we had negative dynamic stability, then that would be like a positive feedback loop. It would be like a small thing getting to a big thing and just like this. If you ever been in a car with like terrible suspension, you feel that you have one bump and then it just kind of just keeps going up and up and up. Yeah, I was going through chapter 5 this morning. This has a lot of good stuff in it. You need more aerodynamic stuff, PHEC chapter 5. Oh yeah. Neutral, positive, and negative dynamic stability. You have to have positive static stability in order to have any of this dynamic stability. Because why would you have to have positive static stability in order to talk about the dynamic stability? What's neutral static stability again? Stays in the same spot. Okay, so how would you describe that over time? It keeps staying in the same spot. We don't have any oscillations, so there's nothing to describe. How about negative static stability? What is that, Mason?
It's but you know, when it goes like that.
Wait, let me help you out. Recycle the last answer that you just gave. It keeps going. It keeps going. Okay, so it's just going to keep going. Then we know what happens already. The initial reaction is the same as the reaction over time. So we're talking about dynamic stability. The plane has to be positively, has to have positive static stability. Okay. Doop-de-doo.
Would it not just be like why
Yeah, I think some aerobatic planes are negatively stable. I know some Air Force planes, the way that they're built in order to get the characteristics they want, they have to be basically incredibly unstable, and a pilot would not be able to fly it manually. It has to have a whole bunch of like automatic servos that keep it flying, but you sacrifice that kind of stuff for speed or whatever it is they're going for. Okay. What makes us turn? If I say, okay, give me a medium bank turn left, what is making us turn? The ailerons are making us turn. Can someone tell me why?
You're taking vertical lift and turning to horizontal.
Yeah, we're exchanging some of our vertical lift and adding a horizontal component. So instead of having lift go straight up, it's partly going to the side like this. Okay. If we have this horizontal component of lift, what opposes that horizontal component of lift? Centrifugal force. Yeah, exactly. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Also, like inertia. If our plane's going this way, it wants to keep going this way. So if we tell it to go that way, the plane wants to keep going in this direction, but it can't. We're forcing it to go this way, and that's that inertial force. Okay. Oh, right. Tell me why we need back pressure in a turn
To keep our altitude.
to keep our altitude, but why do we need back pressure to keep our altitude?
So
Coordination is more to do with our rudders.
we lose too much lift.
Yeah, if we're straight and level, we're not changing the power setting or anything. What we have exactly the same amount of weight and lift that we're not moving at all. They're completely balanced. So if we get rid of some of our horizontal component of lift or some of our vertical component of lift, creating less lift upwards, exchanging it for some horizontal lift, well, then now weight is more than our lifts. So we need to create more lifts. How do we create more lifts? Someone? Yeah, we could have more thrust, more airflow would create more lifts. We pitch up. And why does pitching up create more lift? Increasing our angle of attack. Right.
On the higher wing in a turn, that aileron's going down, just increasing the angle of attack in that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So is that? We're still, it's just not equal, right? Like, even with increasing that, because that wing gets more lift in a turn, right?
Yeah, that wing does get more lift in a turn.
But overall, we would still lose. That doesn't like equal.
We have more lift on this wing than on this wing,
We lose lift.
which is what causes us to roll. Yeah, the lift is still, well, we do increase our drag, so we're losing a little bit of lift to drag, but the main reason is we're no longer creating lift straight up. We're creating lift out here. And as you can imagine, if you took that to an extreme and we're doing an 80-degree bank, we would have so much horizontal component of lift. This is where we want to go, that we would need to have a ton of speed, a really high angle of attack, something to get us to stay in the air. We probably wouldn't be able to. We'd be sinking as we do that. But speaking of one wing creating more lift than the other one creating more drag, why do we need rudder coordination in a turn? Yeah, we don't slip or skid. Yeah, staying coordinated will keep us from slipping or skidding. But how come when we're in straight and level flight, we don't need any rudder, or maybe we just need a tiny bit of rudder to stay coordinated? But once we turn, we need to have that rudder.
Is that because we're increasing our power and we're gonna have a one of the
Left turning tendencies?
Left turning tendencies?
No, it's a separate one from that. But we will talk about left turning tendencies. But so John just said that one wing creates more lift than the other one creates some drag. So what happens with that setup? Do you have something?
I forget the name of it, but when I was doing like the Dutch rolls, it's like your nose kind of goes over.
Mhm.
So that's something like that, maybe.
Yeah. It has to do with adverse yaw. So if we're turning, this is creating more lift, this is creating more drag. Then if this is creating more drag, just like, let's imagine we're in a boat, a motorboat, and I go ahead and stick an oar in the water as the motorboat is going forward. Well, we're going to turn. We're going to start turning that way. We're going to yaw in that direction. So this is creating more drag. So the butt of our plane is going to swing out in this direction. In order to combat that, we need to have rudder input to coordinate so that our nose and our tail are roughly aligned in this turn. But speaking of those turning tendencies, can you tell me what one of those left turning tendencies is?
We have the P factor.
P factor, someone explain P factor.
The angle of the blade. It turns right, has a bigger bite of the air than when it goes towards the left.
Under what circumstance? Because the prop angles are uniform, right? So under what circumstance would,
The ascending blade has more. Oh, that's the term.
If you're.
It has,
yeah, we got some elements here. They're a little
the
bit
ascending
mixed.
is more torque than the descending.
Not quite. So, this was my little helicopter example. So if you are straight and level, the ascending blade and the descending blade, since it's going clockwise, are going to be taking the angle of attack for each of these blades is going to be the same. As you pitch up, the ascending blade becomes more and more and more vertical, and the descending blade becomes more and more and more horizontal. If we pitch down, it would be the opposite. So when we pitch up and we have P factor, then we're going to have a bigger bite out of the air on the right side, which is going to make us turn left. Does that make sense? Why? We have more force on the right, just like you're paddling a boat. If you have more force on the right, it's going to turn you to the left. What else do we have? P factor, what else?
Torque effect.
Torque. Someone tell me what torque is.
Like an example of torque or like what?
Yeah, well, how is this a turning tendency?
It's I guess when you, it's faster you rotate the propeller, the faster you rotate to the right, I guess the nose of the plane would rotate to the left.
Not quite.
So.
Who else?
So that one states that it comes with Newton's third law, so every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Our propeller turns to the right, so we're gonna turn our tail's gonna turn to the left.
Exactly. You ever use like a cordless drill, to screw something in? It's going to turn to the right, but if you kind of held it loosely, the whole drill would turn in the opposite direction because it's not like cemented to the ground. So we have our engine running, we have our crankshaft spinning, and it's spinning our prop, but in a sense, a very real sense, it's also trying to spin our plane in the other direction. If a super strong giant grabbed our prop and stopped it cold, then our plane would just start rotating in the other direction. So some of that resistance from the air is translating in a rolling motion. Okay, so that's torque. What else do we have? That's two. Spiraling slipstream. How's that work? Amara.
Something about the way the air goes into the. I don't remember.
I feel like you're halfway there.
Or
Mm-hmm.
another way, like,
Yeah. Okay, so we got a plane. And we got a propeller. There's downwash from that propeller. And since the propeller's moving this way, it's going to go around the plane, back around, and hit the rudder. It's going to happen if we have a force on the rudder from the left side. Yeah, it's going to yaw to the left. Yeah, you're there.
Is that kind of like a vortice, a vortex?
Kind of. It's more like I'd call it downwash. Vortices more have to do with unequal pressure, and this is just like generating wind. And what's the last one?
wait, really quick, so like if the air is rotating like over the propeller, and it It's just gonna like make it go the opposite way.
So the downwash from this is going in a circular motion because our propeller is rotating in a circular motion. Counterclockwise, or no, clockwise. So it's gonna go around here and then wrap around the bottom of the plane and come back and hit our tail. If we were rotating the other way, we'd hit the tail on this side and make it go this way. But since it's hitting on the left side, it's gonna push our tail to the right, which means our nose goes to the left, and we have that yaw. So we have to use more rudder in order to stop that. What's the last turning tendency?
Gyroscopic.
Gyroscopic precession. Okay, someone tell me about that. What is a gyroscope? Something that's spinning, okay? If you had to describe a gyroscope, what, are there any other terms you'd use? How does a gyroscope behave?
Stay stationary until the force is acted upon it.
Yeah, rigidity in space is the term that's used for a gyroscope. It doesn't want to, it resists any change to motion. So if you spun a top and then you flicked it, it would take that force, but then recover. It resists that change to motion. Okay, so what happens when a force is applied to a gyroscope?
The force is about 90 degrees.
90 degrees from what?
The direction.
Exactly. So a gyroscope has to be rotating in a certain direction. For us, the prop is going clockwise, like this, from our perspective anyway. So it's going clockwise. And if we change it, like we go to the right or the left, up, down, instead of feeling the force in the direction that we're putting that force, the force is felt 90 degrees later. So if I pitch up, that would be like a force from the bottom, which should be felt 90 degrees in the direction of travel, which should be push to the right. If we pitch down, that's a force from above going down. So 90 degrees in direction of travel would be right here, which would be a turn to the left, requiring more right rudder. In what situation is this a left turning tendency then?
When we're climbing up.
Not when we're climbing now.
When you power. Oh, no, we slow.
When we pitch down, okay. So why is that important for some planes when they're taking off? This is a left turning tendency during takeoff for a tail dragger, for a conventional gear, they call it. So if we have a tail dragger like this is what we're going to be like when we're taking off. And then in order to take off, they have to take pressure off the tail. They have to pitch down. So they're just on their two wheels and then they take off. So when they're dragging their tail and then they put their nose down before they take off, that's felt as a left turning tendency. If you were, I don't know, maybe your approach wasn't very stable when you're coming in and you're kind of high and slow and then you just like dive down, you would have a left turning tendency as you come down. Yeah, it's just a turning tendency, not necessarily a left turning tendency. Depends on the situation. Okay. Talked about this. We have horizontal component of lift, vertical component of lift. So the total lift is going like this. Total lift, the opposite of that is the resultant load. So basically gravity, it feels like gravity is coming from this direction. That's why if we have a coordinated steep turn where we're not climbing or descending, we don't really feel any G forces. It just feels normal. But if we were pulling up from that, we would start to feel some G's. So if we have the total lift and resultant load even, it's nice and coordinated. The horizontal component of lifts, going to the left, the opposite of that is the centrifugal force. Yeah, and weight is the opposite of the vertical component of lift. If you understand how this works, I'm not super concerned about the specific terms, like you need to know that exactly. Just know that when you're turning, you're exchanging some vertical lift for horizontal lift. Inertia wants to fight that, so we have centrifugal force that's fighting that. And yeah, we were talking about load factor. The resultant load is what it's talking about. So if we were to do a diving steep turn and we're experiencing some G's, that's because we're increasing our resultant load. I don't feel like that's super important at this point in time. Load factor doesn't change a whole lot, meaning the amount of G's that we're feeling. It doesn't change a whole lot with bank angle until we get extreme. So when we're doing steep turns, yeah, there is a little bit, even if we are coordinated and not climbing or descending, we are feeling a little bit of extra load, maybe 20% more, 15% more, something like that. So you can see right here. But when we get to 60 degrees, it's twice as much. And as we approach 90, it skyrockets. Yeah, once we get over 60 degrees, I don't think it's considered a standard maneuver. So you'd have to have an aerobatic plane in order to do any of that stuff. Talked about adverse yaw, turning tendencies, rudder coordination, drag. Okay, this is kind of an example of that. Okay, so this has some right angles. What kind of drag is that? Form drag. What other kinds of drags are there? Skin friction and what else?
Induced drag.
Interference drags. Interference drag. So yeah, you're right. The form of this, the shape of this is creating drag, but also it has right angles. And that is creating some parasite drag as well. Wind hits it, it buffets around, blah, blah, blah. Sphere doesn't have any right angles, but it's still a shape taking up space. And just because it's not a right angle doesn't mean it can't have some kind of interference drag, because the angle could be smoother. So this isn't exactly acting as a right angle, but it's close-ish. So we add a fairing to it, we add a housing to it, makes it a little bit smoother.
Which one's the housing and which one's the fairing?
This is the fairing going over the outside. Housing isn't like a term for the front of, it's not like an aviation term. It's just like it's housed in something.
So once there's something going around the whole object.
Yeah, basically it's matching the front with the back in a shape to make it to create the least amount of buffeting, least amount of disturbance with the what's the word I'm looking for? The fluid.
But the fairings can be in front too, like this or like. Or is that a housing?
Yeah, so no. Housing is not like a aviation term. Yeah, those are all called fairings. That's the name of that part. I keep bringing it to boats, but it's kind of like that. If we had a boat that was just a rectangle, we'd be getting some interference on the front, and then as we pull it through, it would be creating a lot of disturbance in the back as well. If we put that out, this is like the back of a canoe or something. It's going to create less in the front, but it's still going to be kind of disturbing it in the front. This is a full-on canoe, and it's cutting through the water in the front and relieving its return in the back. Let's not focus too heavily on this. Induced drag, we talked about that. Why is someone tell me about our best glide speed? If you had to define what best glide speed is. I know it's 72 knots in our plane, but what's going on here? Why is that? Why is our best glide speed our best glide speed?
It's when induced drag and parasite drag meet. It's the best. Well, other.
Yeah. It gives you the furthest distance. Why? So when do we make induced drag? When you're creating lift. Okay, good. When is parasite drag the most?
When we're descending.
Could be. Could be when we're descending, but I'm looking for something more specific than that.
When.
Yeah,
our
it could be
surf-
cruise flight.
Our plane is with the relative wind.
It's when we're going the fastest. The faster you go, the more parasite drag is going to be because the relative wind is going to be hitting all this stuff. Skin friction is going to be at its highest. Form, interference, it's all going to be at its highest. So the faster you go, the more parasite drag you're going to get. But the faster you're going, if we're going slow, we need a big angle of attack to stay in the air, right? We need to create a whole bunch of lifts to stay in the air because we're going so slow. If we have a big angle of attack, that gives us a lot of induced drag, right? Is everyone following so far? So the faster we go, we can lower our nose even more and have a smaller and smaller and smaller angle of attack. So the faster we go, the less induced drag we have, but the more parasitic drag we have. The slower we go, the less parasite drag we have, but the more induced drag we have. So you were talking about it's where induced and parasitic drag meet. Yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it. You're always going to have to add up induced drag and parasite drag, and that's going to be your total drag. There's a point at which you have the smallest total. It's the least amount of induced drag and the least amount of parasite drag together and gives us the least total drag.
I had a question the other day about our VY, and I was thinking of this number. I didn't realize the VY and our best glide speed are coincidentally the same.
Yeah, they're not exactly, they're 72, they're both 72 for different reasons. So, yeah, as you can see, induced drag is super high. We know this from slow flight. You're doing slow flight at 55 knots or something. You're going basically full throttle to not go anywhere and not go anywhere very slowly. Like if you got out of slow flight and just pitched your nose down, you'd be going, a lot faster. So yeah, induced drag is super high when we're slow because we need to have a high angle of attack, bigger vortices, more induced drag. That goes down with speed as we get to lower our nose. If we're not moving at all, we're not going to have any form drag. If there's no relative wind, it's not going to be stopping us at all. If we're only going 10 knots, well, that's also not going to slow us down a lot. If we're going 500 knots, or we're a space shuttle re-entering the atmosphere, there's going to be a whole lot of parasitic drag, form drag, is the other term for it. So best glide speed is just the point at which induced drag and form drag added together is at the least. The total drag is at the least. Yeah, it's cute. Corgis are aerodynamic. Skin friction drag. Oh my God. We only have 40 minutes left and we haven't even gotten into this. Okay, I'm gonna skip G3X stuff today. You're getting more and more familiar with it in the plane. I want someone to tell me how a piston engine works. Just in simple terms, how does a piston engine work? If you were to explain it to a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old, let's say. It's a big question.
I'll try.
All right.
There's like 4 parts of it, right?
Okay.
The intake part,
Mm-hmm.
where it takes in fuel,
Mm-hmm.
and then it,
Fuel alone?
no,
Someone help them out?
Air.
Fuel and air, yeah.
and then it condenses it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Compresses it.
Okay.
And then the third one is it comes back up to what?
Power.
To power. And then it explodes. It comes back down again. And that goes for all 4 of them.
Okay.
Different times.
We're in the right ballpark. Laura, it sounded like you had some thoughts on it.
Like explode with thoughts.
Oh, it's almost, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are 4 strokes to piston engine. We can start there. We have the intake. Fuel and air mixture comes in. In where? What am I even talking about?
Into a chamber.
Chamber called a cylinder. Okay, so a piston is within a cylinder. Let's start there, actually. So we have a piston inside of a cylinder. The piston goes down, pulls in the fuel air mixture. Then the piston goes back up, compresses that fuel air mixture. At that point, when it's most compressed, spark plugs go off, ignites that fuel air mixture, which pushes the piston back down, creating power. That's the power stroke. And then the piston comes back up and pushes that exhaust out. And then it pulls fuel and air in, compresses, ignites, pushes down, pushes out. Those are the 4 strokes of an engine. Let's see. Okay, so we have an engine. And we have 4 cylinders in our Rotax 912 engine that are firing. They're all going up and down, different times, synced together. What are our pistons attached to?
Right.
The crankshafts. Right, very good. So our pistons, actually, let's find a slide for that. Load. Okay, so our pistons are going up and down, and they're attached to this crankshaft. This is taking the horizontal motion and converting it into rotational motion. Someone, not Laura, tell me, name anything that the crankshaft is attached to. You got a generator, got a generator with two parts. Some people say two generators, really. One generator, two sides. Okay, so we got a generator on the back end. We'll talk about that. What else is it attached to?
The propeller
The propeller. Yeah,
and the I wanna say synchro, but like the ratio, the reducer. Well,
yeah. Does anyone know the name of what he's talking about? The gear reduction box. Yeah. Who knows what that ratio is?
2.43.
To 1, yeah. 2.43 to 1. So it slows down our propeller, in other words. Okay, here's kind of a bonus question, more advanced. We haven't talked about it. What else? Can you think of anything else that our crankshaft is connected to?
Oil pump.
In a way, yes, and that is what I'm getting at. So is the oil pump attached directly to our crankshaft? Yeah. There's a middleman here. So it's it's our oil pump.
That's the gear reduction.
No. So we have a couple mechanical pumps. And if it was attached to our crankshaft, we'd be pressurizing that shit way too hard. So we have something else called camshaft. Camshaft is basically another geared down crankshaft that gets power from a crankshaft, gears it down to whatever we need it for. So our coolant and our oil pumps are mechanical, and they are powered by the camshaft, which is powered by the crankshafts, which is powered by our cylinders going up and down. All right. So we need, in order for our propeller to spin and for our generator to produce electricity and for our mechanical pumps to be working, the engine needs to be running. Some brave person, tell me, how do we get our engine running? Go master on A, B, main pump, You're about to turn the key. What happens when we turn the key?
Send the signal to the starter, and the starter with the flywheel spins them, I think.
Sort of, you're on the right track.
It connects to the starter relay to the crankshaft and
Close. Huh? No, because the generators don't really get turned on. It's just that when they're in motion, they're producing electricity. They're not in motion yet. And we know from a couple weeks ago that our engine needs our ECU to run. And our ECU isn't running unless our generator is moving. So our generator is not moving yet. So how do we get that started? We need some form of electricity. Where's a good place to store electricity? The battery. Okay, so we got the 12-volt battery. That 12-volt battery connects to, you mentioned the starter motor. What does the starter motor do physically? What does the starter do? It turns the crankshaft. So now that the crankshaft is turning, what else is happening besides the prop spinning?
Hurry up the
Yes, now that the crankshaft is moving, the generator is also moving. The magnet within the stators starts spinning, creating electricity. Now that our generator is creating electricity, what form does that electricity take?
PC.
AC current. Yes. So good. with our AC current, we need to change the DC current, so it goes to our rectifier. How many rectifier regulators do we have? Two. Two rectifier regulators. Why?
One for lane A, one for lane B.
No, it's not really
Not
connected to the
lane,
lanes.
Generator, like first.
Yeah.
The generator is like the brand and it splits into like A and B. A powers one section, the whole engine, B powers the electronic section.
You're saying some right things and then some not so right things. So, lane A and lane B, people get this confused a lot. Has nothing to do with the generators. Has nothing to do with generators. Lane A and lane B are control the ECU. The ECU has kind of two processors. They can both do 100% of the work at any given time, but they share the load. Lane A and lane B are just on-off switches for each side of the ECU. Lane A goes off, and lane B takes over all the processes. Okay, so we have two rectifier regulators because we have two sides to the generator. What does generator A do? Powers the ECU. Okay, so it goes from generator A, rectifier regulator, to the ECU. What does the ECU do?
It's power to spark plugs, or in the world, the coil pumps,
Yeah.
fuel pumps.
Mm-hmm. Got one more. Fuel injectors. Yes. What else does ECU do? Doesn't just give power to things. Yeah. It makes all the decisions on, namely our mixture, timing, all that kind of stuff. Okay. Christopher, what does generator B power?
All the other stuff.
That's a pretty good answer. All the other stuff. So where does all the other stuff get its electricity? Well, generator B, but it's not directly from generator B.
It powers the battery.
Yes. So generator B, rectifier regulator to the battery, and then the battery powers all of our other electrical stuff. Yeah, good. That's the electrical system. I want one brave person to summarize that entire process for me one more time. The electrical system. We start the engine. What's happening? We turn the key, then what? We'll do it as a group. I turn the key. What happened? Yes, but there's a step before that.
Use the battery starts.
Yep. Links the battery to the starter relay. Takes the 12-volt power into a usable form for the starter motor.
That's what happens with the ECU battery vacuum. So it connects the starter motor to the battery.
Well, we turn ECU battery back up off again, don't we? It's among a couple other things, it's priming the engine, so it's giving us fuel. Okay, so it goes from battery to the starter relay to the starter. What does the starter do? When the crankshaft is turning, what's happening now? Generators start producing electricity in the form of. Okay, so we need what comes next? Rectifier regulator DC current. So from generator A goes to rectifier regulator to DC current. That powers what? The ECU powers and controls what? Spark plugs, fuel injector, pumps, mixture. So now our engine's running. We don't need our starter motor anymore. It's all self-sustaining, generating electricity. Once we go over 2,500 RPMs, generator B kicks in, and generator B, what happens next?
Charge the battery.
Yes, go back a step.
That's battery.
Generator B's doing AC current, rectifier regulator. Changes it to DC current. DC current goes to the battery. Battery gets charged. And everything else gets charged through the battery. Okay. What would be the sign of a generator failure? Yeah, that's a pretty good sign. Let's say lane A is not flashing. So what
Negative amps.
negative amps? Tell me more about that.
Means your battery is being depleted. On your system. You know, it's A, B. It's A, B, on.
Yeah, could you say that one more time?
If our lanes fail, right? That was the main.
No, not if lanes fail.
Generator.
For generator, let's keep those separate. Lane A, B, generator A, B, separate forever and ever in perpetuity.
Our generator failed, it no longer would be charging battery. And you would have negative amps,
Because what is a negative? What does that mean? Negative amps.
your battery is being depleted.
Our battery is always being depleted, though.
And you're not charging it. to the generator.
Yes, so we're using more electricity from the battery than we are charging it. Right? So what would be if we were using the exact amount of electricity from the battery as we were putting back into it, what would our amps read? 0. That's our goal. What if we were charging it more than we're using? When do you see positive amps in our plane?
When we're starting,
When we start it up? Well, yeah, initially we'll see negative amps because generator B isn't producing electricity right away necessarily, especially if we start under 2,500 RPM. But then once we go over 2,500 RPM, we're looking for positive amps. Why isn't it 0? Yeah, we're also, the engine's not running very fast either, so we're not producing as much electricity. So why do we have positive amps in the beginning? It's just a logic question, not a systems question.
isn't it because like we turn off the engine and the battery stays like that for a while? Like not being used, and then when we turn it on, it's like getting somewhat of a.
Well, yeah, but positive amps is showing that we're charging more than we're using. Why would that be right after we start up, a few seconds after we start up?
So we haven't turned on the lights, it's
We haven't turned on stuff yet. Our load is less, so we have positive amps. We increase the load, the amps go down to 0. Okay, so you said that a sign of a generator failure would be negative amps, right? Okay, if we see negative 2 amps while we're flying, does that mean we have a generator failure? Not necessarily. We don't know. Maybe, maybe not. How can we test that? Shed load. Okay, so Mason, we are flying. No, you're flying on your solo. You're flying solo and you see negative indication, maybe just land. Okay, so you're soloing back from your cross country. This is 2 weeks from now when you're doing your solo cross country. Or a month or whatever. You see negative 2 amps, and you said to test this out, see if you have a generator failure or not, you want to shed load. What does that mean specifically? Like, what would you do?
Choose less. Lights.
Yeah, turn off some lights, and what would you be looking for?
Amps.
Yeah, you're looking for 0. Okay, let's say you turn off a couple of your lights, and your amps go back to 0. Is that the end of it? It's the end of the story?
No,
No? What else would you be doing?
um,
Or what would you be doing from then on?
keep a closer look.
Yeah, staring at it while maintaining situational awareness and flying the plane, all that stuff. Okay, so if it stays there, probably not a generator failure. And we know that because maybe we're just not generating as much electricity as we need to generate. Maybe the generators are old or something and it's just not working as well, but hasn't failed. What's another way we can test this? Let's say we're cruising back at a nice leisurely pace. Mason's trying to get his 5 hours of solo time, and he's like, "Oh shoot, I'm gonna be at 4.8 if I land like this. I'm gonna slow it down, make sure I get my 5 hours." So he's cruising at like 4,900 RPMs, and he sees -2 amps. What else could he do to test this theory?
Increase the throttle up so that the generators are producing more electricity.
Yeah, the faster our crankshaft spins, the more electricity we produce in the generators. Makes sense? So we can do that. Okay, but we do those things and it goes to 0, but then it goes back to -1 and then -2 and -3. Probably we're starting to experience the beginning stages of a generator failure. So what would we do in this scenario? Now that we've determined, hey, this is probably a generator failure. Climb? Yeah, if we're not already at a good altitude, sure.
Turn off some stuff.
Turn some more stuff off. How much stuff can I turn off before the plane falls out of the sky? So we got basically everything on. Yeah, got all this stuff on. So we already turned off our map and landing lights. Okay, what else can we turn off?
Autopilot.
Autopilot, gone.
Set the taxi light.
Taxi light, turn that off. Yeah, so what would I do to turn off the G5? EFS 2?
You turn off everything that's on. Yeah.
Hey,
Old or.
What did you turn off?
aux pump. Okay, so this is the minimum that we need to have on. I guess technically you could turn off one of the lanes, but why would you do that? And we could even turn our master off. Just as a side note, if we experienced an electrical fire, so it's kind of a burnt plastic, acrid smell, that slowly starts to emanate from the cockpit. If you're experiencing an electrical fire, first thing you do is just turn the master off. Turn the master off, is the plane gonna fall out of the sky?
No.
Why? Why will the engine keep running with the master off?
Just run by itself.
Because
It's independent.
completely independent. The generator is giving electricity to the ECU, so it's completely independent. You can keep the master on though for now. Okay, so we can turn basically everything off. That's going to shed the load. But if we really are experiencing a generator failure, it's going to get worse and worse and worse and worse until what?
You need a land.
Well, if our generator is failing, sure, it puts us at risk of losing our electronics, but what else does it pose the risk of? The most important thing in our plane.
Your ECU.
Our ECU. What happens if we lose our ECU?
Your engine cease.
It won't cease, but it will stop. We won't have spark, we won't have fuel, we won't have any of that stuff. Okay, So let's say we're out in the middle of the ocean and landing is not an option. We need to get every ounce of strength out of all the power we have here. Okay? So now that our generator has failed, are we just out of luck? We got to do a water landing now?
Turn on the ECU backup.
Okay, what does ECU backup do?
I think it switches the power like directly, I think. Or like,
You're on the right track. You want to help them out?
Connects the battery to the ECU.
Connects the 12-volt battery to the ECU. Okay, and they say that we have up to 30 minutes
and then it
With that.
should have a personal.
personal minimum.
Yeah, because it's 30 minutes, but do you really trust 30?
Well, yeah,
minutes?
so
30
let's
minutes?
talk about that. So I was teeing up. Okay, so if we had this generator failure over time, our ECU is always going to be prioritized. So whichever generator is worse off, or it's better off, is going to power the ECU. So what does that imply for the state of charge on our battery? Is it 100%? No, of course not. It's going to be something less than 100%. 50%, I don't know. And the sooner we shed all of our load, once we shed all of this electrical load, then we're not using the battery anymore. So we're holding on to whatever energy we have left in the battery for when the engine inevitably stops, and then we have to restart it using ECU backup.
I know it's probably random for a stupid question, but if all that is off, that you have all that off, are the radios off?
Everything's off. So let's set this aside for a second. So we had to shed a whole bunch of load, but we also want to know where we're going. We want to have as much help as possible. Of course, yeah, we want to know what our airspeed is, how far are we from things. We want as much help as possible. So what can I do now that I've shut everything off to get some of our stuff back?
You hold the power button.
Hold the power button. Great. So now the G5 is back on. Anything else we can do?
Turn on the
Power button.
Huh?
What do you mean hold the power button?
There's a power button on the G5. Just has a battery attached to the back of it. If you press it, it runs off its battery. Lasts a super long time. Longer than your generator's gonna last. Or longer than your 12-volt battery's gonna last anyway. So you can turn that back on. Is there anything else we can get for free?
Does the G3X also have a battery?
Does it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
8 hours, and then the G5 is also 8 hours.
they're less than 8 hours. That's been going around, but they're 8 hours. It's more like 4 and like 45 minutes or something like that. We've definitely had like demonstrations where the plane's not on, put the G3X on and it drains the battery. But again, it'll be longer than you'll be flying the plane on ECU backup for sure. Okay, so what can I do for the G3X? How can I get that back without taking anything from the main battery?
You just hold down the power button on.
When you get the Hobbs time, did you turn the plane on or anything like that?
What's that?
It's
EF backup, EFS 1. And we want to make sure it's not taking anything from the battery. We can even turn the master off. That disconnects the 12-volt battery from basically everything else. So now we have our G3X back and we have our G5 back. We have a little bit more situational awareness, but you're right, we don't have any comms. So what can we do to communicate? Is there anything we can do to communicate?
transpond.
Well, our transponder's connected to avionics. What would you do?
Bring a handheld radio.
Bring a handheld radio, it's always a good option.
We should turn on the ELT.
That's pretty good, yeah. ELT would, if you got an ELT running, but you're flying normally, people will usually think that it was an accident. But that is a good idea. That's better than nothing. what else could we do? Or let me phrase it this way, what else could we have done?
Question though, the ELT, the battery's only like 60 minutes on that, is that right?
It's. No, it's more than that. I think you're thinking of 30 minutes of, no, an hour of continuous use, is that what it is?
Yeah, for
Yeah,
the.
that's just when you have to,
Replace it
yeah,
or check it.
when you have to get an ELT inspection.
Okay, so.
But it lasts longer than that. Otherwise, it wouldn't be much of an emergency
Right.
beacon. I don't know how long it lasts, but it's gotta be many hours, maybe a couple days. What could we have done to communicate?
Turn on avionics.
Before we shed load, communicate to someone. We could squawk 7700. We can communicate and say, hey, ident, can you see me? This is my location. I'm experiencing a generator failure. And I need electricity for my plane to fly. And I'm heading toward this airport. So clear a way for me. Expect me in, I don't know, 20 minutes or whatever it is. And you know, if you don't see me, then you have to look for me. I'm gonna go dark, basically. If you don't know the right words to say, you mumble through it just like I did. The main goal is to communicate. So yeah, you just tell them what's going on, and they'll say, "Great." When you get close, if you have some extra energy, turn your avionics back on. Tell us, but otherwise, you know, just fly the plane. That's the main priority. So we could have done that, and that's what I would suggest doing. Communicate while you can. Once you're done communicating, shed all that load. We turn the ECU back up on. And what is, you just did your phase check. Can you tell me what the engine restart procedure is?
You engine restart.
Mhm.
So engine failure. So throttle out.
Mhm.
Fuel is set, and then basically everything in the red. Make sure they're on,
Mhm.
and then starter.
Yeah, it's basically all set up already, but the only thing we had to change is throttle to half. Switching the tanks, what does switching the tanks kind of solve or troubleshoot?
Make sure there's no blockage.
Yeah, if we had if we thought maybe the engine failed from a blockage, we would switch the tanks. We know exactly why this failed, so if we switch the tanks, it would just kind of perform it. But yeah, then we fly to our destination. One last question before we zip up our bags. All right, we want our engine to last as long as possible. And we need electricity to power our ECU, and our ECU is pumping fuel, giving us spark, all that stuff. So how can we conserve that as much as possible now that our generator's completely failed and we're running on stored electricity?
Turn off your lights.
No, we already shed all our load. So only thing the battery is touching is the ECU. How can we be as efficient as possible? It's 72. Why? Why best glide speed?
Reduce drag.
It's the least amount of drag that we can produce. So we're gonna go the furthest distance on like the least amount of piston strokes in another way of putting it. Okay, so that's our electrical system. And let's see if there's anything else. Compression systems, carburetors. We talked about carburetors, right? Use the Venturi effects. All right, we can end it there. My God, there's a lot to cover in one day. But yeah, chapter 5 for aerodynamics. Brush up on your sling systems. And I'll see you tomorrow. Michael, we're flying today, right?
Yeah, we are.
Oh, yeah. What time?
Cool. I'm Sunday. I was falling sick or something.
Do you want to call in sick?